Hello, this is Eric Williams. I'm a technical marketing engineer for Cisco, one of our XML API experts at Cisco. And I've got Alan Renouf. Alan, introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Alan Renouf. I work for technical marketing at VMware and focus on automation.
So what we're going to start off with here is we're going to show our environment today. So I'm showing now UCS Manager. This is running in one of our labs in Cisco. And I'm showing basically that we have nothing to find today. So we don't have any boot policies. There's no service profiles, no templates defined in UCSM. I've got a couple of VLANs defined today, one for a private network and one for a public network that we'll end up utilizing, as well as, but that's the only thing that's really been pre-created inside of UCS. If you see here, there's no Mac pools or anything that have been created today. And I'll let Alan talk about what we have with vSphere.
So on the vSphere side of things, you can see we have a vCenter server up and running at the moment. We've got an initial data center called San Jose in there. If we go over to the host profile side of things, the host profile, remember, is the configuration for each host that comes into the system. We don't have any host profiles set up at the moment, so we essentially have a blank virtual center system here.
So one thing I will comment on of what we have actually done prior to this, prior to setting all of this up, is the only work for UCS Manager that we did was actually setting up the hardware, cabling it, getting it up and running to an initial level. And then one thing that we're going to show through here and create, we're going to go and start running the script now, and we'll talk over it, is basically on the UCS Manager side, we're creating everything that we need to be able to show this and to make this work. So we're creating your Mac pool, your worldwide port name pool. We're also going to create the server pool qualification policy, the server pool policy, the boot policy, recreate the VLANs, the vSAN. We'll create a service profile template that's going to utilize all of those items. The service profile template will be called CL2012.
So you'll notice throughout this script we are integrating between the Cisco PowerShell toolkit and the VMware PowerShell toolkit. So for every line in the script you'll see either a VC or a UCS before it, defining which area we're using, and also we're passing the information between these two technologies and showing the real integration that comes with PowerShell. So we're just starting to add the VMware ESXi library, and now we've gone through and we've created a deploy rule which uses Cisco's OEM string and uses the service template CL2012 in this case. We then create a further rule to tell it which cluster to put VMware image in, and we actually create the cluster. We make sure that DRS is enabled on that cluster, and then we make sure that the rule set is okay before continuing on with the script.
So once we've done that, we will then go ahead and create a net new service profile from that pre-created template. So now you'll see the ESXi host 1 has been created from the CL2012. So now let's go ahead and look. We're going to go through and look to see the items that we've created. So we've created a server pool policy that's going to basically use a server pool qualification called CL2012. Upon that qualification, dynamically add servers into the server pool CL2012. And for that qualification policy, basically it has two qualifications. One for the type of adapter that we're using. So in this case, we're using the Cisco virtual interface card. And we're also providing processor qualification. So we're only looking for servers that have a specific processor and are using the Cisco virtual interface card. And those items will then have been populated into the server pool. So in this example, you see in this pool I have three servers that have dynamically added, and one has already been assigned. You'll see that again we have the VLANs that we need for the environment as well as the new Mac pool. And inside of that Mac pool we have again a range of MAC addresses where we'll have a couple of them been assigned to the Ethernet interfaces for that net new service profile. And if we look over on the SAN tab, we have the worldwide port name that's already been pre-zoned, like I said prior, but two of them have been assigned to the fiber channel interfaces on the same hypervisor. So now if you look at the ESXi host system, you'll see that it's in the configuration state. So it's actually doing the association process at this point in time with UCS. So it's actually going through and associating that service profile configuration to the actual blade.
And on the VMware side, we can see that our cluster has now been created. And if we go through that cluster, you can see that we have enabled DRS on this cluster.
So now the process is going to wait for the service profile association to complete. So what we'll see here is basically the service profile association process. It's basically going to load our utility operating system, which will actually do the firmware upgrades, the inventory that it needs to happen to basically match that exact configuration that's in the service profile. So once that's done, you're going to see the state go from associating to associated, and then now the script has changed the desired power state to be up. So basically the script will wait till the association process is finished and then change that desired power state from down to up. So part of that service profile template, the initial configuration for firmware is I'm using the default firmware policy that we have created. And on this particular default firmware policy, it's set to use version 2.1 290 as as the firmware version for the blade and the rack systems. So you'll see here that the server is actually running. The firmware is version 290. And now that since the association process was complete, the service profile is now being changed. The power state was changed to up, like you saw before in the UCS Manager GUI, and now vCenter is waiting for the host with that service profile with this particular MAC address to actually boot. So we'll go through, and you'll see that we're doing the gPXE, and you see all the different attributes that you can create auto deploy rules for.
And on this screen, you can also see that Cisco have taken advantage of the OEM strings that we provide. And auto deploy is now starting to take place. So auto deploy is a feature of vSphere version 5. Auto deploy allows you to PXE boot your bare metal hosts and deploy the ESXi image to the bare metal. As you can see here, the service template has been picked up, the image has been picked up from the rules that we created earlier, and it will now start the boot process for ESXi. So now the host has booted, you can see that vCenter will automatically add that host into the cluster based on our rule set. We'll now do some host configuration. We'll make sure that this host looks exactly how we need it to look in our environment. Remember, this is the first host that we're configuring, so this is the first host that we will create our host profile from. So we're doing things like adding our vMotion network, we're setting up a network for our virtual machines, we're setting up syslog server, basically any of the post configuration that you would normally do here. Once we've done that, we will create the host profile based on this server to make sure that all our other hosts look exactly the same. We'll then reassign the host profile to the host and make sure it's in compliant with the host. So our first server has now been built.
And we could be able to apply VMs to it. So on to the second example. The second example that we're going to show is basically another set of scripts that we're going to run basically two of the same scripts. And this script will basically add a net new hypervisor into the existing cluster. So what this will do is we're going to run this twice in two different windows. It's basically creating two new service profiles from those templates. So I'm going to create ESXi host 2, and this the screen on the left will create ESXi host 3 inside of this existing ECSM, and it will basically go through the service profile. It'll associate the service profile the same way it did the first one. It's using, again, the same template. You see that, again, based upon the template configuration, these systems are running the same version. They're being updated to version 290, like the first one was as well. And you see on this particular screen that the servers are being associated, so they're in the associating state. And so we'll go through again, watch them boot and be associated. So apply that configuration, update the firmware like the ESXi host one was performed. And again, this script will wait for this association process to finish, and then we'll basically, once it's finished, then it will actually start loading the ESXi hypervisor onto it, very much the same way that the first host was added.
So remember, all of our rules pre-exist, so it's just a case of turning these on, and they will get added into our cluster based on the rule set we created. The host profile will be attached, and they will become compliant and have the complete configuration applied.
The first host that we added, ESXi host 2, has now been added successfully into the cluster, and we're doing the same process for ESXi host 3. It is complete, and we'll go through and look to see, to verify that they are running the right host profile for each system. And they're both compliant and using and booting on the right image profile. On the third example, we've pre-created 3 virtual machines. We're going to power those 3 virtual machines on. There'll be basically 1 virtual machine per hypervisor. And this particular script is going to get all of the hosts that are in the cluster and basically step through a upgrade of the hypervisor plus UCS manager firmware for each hypervisor individually.
So the use cases for this is when you've been using your system for a while, a new version of the firmware comes out for UCS, or a new version of ESXi comes out, and you need to upgrade your hosts. How would you go about that in an automated way? So you can see from the VMware side of things, what we've done here is we've disabled the current image deploy rule. So we're taking away the current version of ESX applied to those hosts, and then we're going to download the latest version from the VMware site and apply that to these hosts.
So the first step that we'll do is put the hypervisor into maintenance mode, which will eject any of the VMs to the other nodes in the cluster. And then we'll tell it to shut itself down gracefully. And on the UCS side, we're going to monitor that shutdown to make sure it's actually done properly. We'll change the desired power state to down, and then if you see here, we're actually changing the firmware policy from default, which was the previous, to now version 3.2.3, which is the most recent. So once the service profile has went through its firmware update process, we'll basically reboot the system, and very much like before, it will basically reboot with the ESXi with the new auto-deploy rule set that we previously created. So see here, it's going to get the newer version of the ESXi hypervisor that we downloaded, or boot successfully into the cluster.
So the host has now been re-added back into the cluster, and we have now put our second host into maintenance mode, which has ejected the virtual machines, and you'll start seeing this one reboot.
So here we're seeing host 1. It is using the host profile and the new image that we downloaded, and you'll see in host 2 this will again change to the associated state, which will do the firmware upgrade process. This one is now running, the server 4 is running version 3.2.3, and we're activating server 3, which is the ESXi host 2. We're activating its firmware at this point. Once the association process is complete, then we will again power that system on and have it boot from the network to boot its hypervisor again.
So at this point in the script, we're basically in a looping through each of our hosts. So it doesn't matter if we have 1, 2, or even 20 hosts in this cluster. It would do each host in turn, and it would reboot them, update the UCS firmware, update the VMware image, and then bring it back online again.
Yeah, one thing that you could do as well, in this particular example, the service profile template is an initial service profile template. It's not an updating template. So one thing that you could do as well is you could modify the script a little bit to be a service profile, have an updating service profile template, where you actually change the firmware on the updating service profile template, but say you're using either like user acknowledgement. So it actually doesn't reboot right now. It'll basically wait for your user acknowledgement. You can modify the script slightly to basically, do the firmware update process once, but actually during that rolling upgrade process, we'll basically do the user acknowledgement. Well, thank you very much for watching our video. Look for more from Alan and myself coming in the future with VMware and UCS integration, as well as potential adding other PowerShell libraries into the mix. Thank you very much.
Thank you.